Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Crypto Hipsters Curtain Calls. This episode is 4 compilations of interviews that I conducted during seasons 7 and 8, 3 from season 7 and 1 from season 8. The title of this episode is called FTX, the first of many crypto implosions to come, how we can overcome additional existential challenges in Web3. The interviewees from this season, from this episode, include the first person is Josh Bowen, who is the co-founder and CEO of Astria. We get into important conversations such as how decentralization may face an existential crisis during the Trump 2.0 era and what we can do about it. We've already seen some things happen. Especially in the past few weeks, with a $19 billion drop down in the market a couple weeks ago. The second person is Ishan Bhaidani, who is a co-founder and the chief revenue officer at Scribe, which is a crypto PR firm. They've had a lot of great clients and customers and companies, Web3, that they've helped deliver messages for and create, campaigns. And so it's a wonderful company. And we get into really one of my 12 episodes that we're shooting from the hip, called how the crypto industry is successfully recovering from the FTX collapse. And this was in May 2024, our conversation. So my conversation with Josh was in March 2025. That was season 8. This conversation is from May 2024. The next 2 conversations are going to be from June 2024. One is my first episode of Reporter on the Ground, Crypto Hipsters, when I went to Consensus in 2024 in Austin, Texas. I had a wonderful conversation with Annelise Osborne, who was, up until yesterday, the chief business officer at Kadena. Kadena had a notification yesterday on Twitter that they were shutting down operations. So I hope, wish her the best for the future. And we talked about all her book about from hoodies to suits. The interesting thing is, after I interviewed her and when I started my videos starting in November of last year, I kind of took the opposite tack. I no longer wear the suits that I did at AIG. I now wear hoodies for almost all of my Crypto Hipster podcasts. Anyway, we talk about, why today's tech entrepreneurs will become tomorrow's successful business leaders. And then the fourth conversation from season 3, from season 7 again, is with Raj Parekh. He is the co-founder and CFO at Portal. We talked about how to power the borderless global economy and bring Web3 to the world, which is an amazing conversation. The first conversation in this compilation is video. 3 others are audio. Still together collectively, it is a video. And I'm bringing that to you now. And it is episode 4. And we talk about the broad sense, the decentralization evolution, how it started out, how it continued, how we're going to face existential crises, and what we can do going forward to make sure that we don't, the whole industry doesn't bottom out. And I don't think that's going to happen, but some people do, but I think they're wrong. So anyway, this is a wonderful compilation. And my episodes and podcasts can be listened to on Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, which is I don't talk about too much, but I should. And my conversations can be listened to there. And then also on YouTube. My YouTube videos were new for season 9, which I'm in right now. So anyway, enjoy, and I'll see you at the end of this compilation. And kick back, have a listen.
Yeah, so I spent last couple of weeks, I was at East Denver, and then, this last week I was at Digital Asset Summit, and kind of my goal there was to essentially just do like a vibe check and kind of understand what is the general feel of the industry? Are people bullish? Are people bearish? Within that, what is the kind of nuance? I think there's a couple things, right? So, there was this degree of almost this like naive kind of take of like, oh, Trump's just going to buy all our coins and like pump our bags kind of thing. And so, we did see maybe a bit of that, right? A couple months ago, right? Now there's, always been this thing of like, is crypto actually like is crypto actually exposed to like macro environments, right? Or is it like an uncorrelated kind of pricing? It's very obvious, right? Like crypto is correlated to like macro environments, right? And the market as a whole, right, is not particularly happy with the tariffs or, certainly the on and off of the tariffs, right? Where maybe even more chaotic, right? If people don't, you can't move, right? If you don't know if a tariff's on in the morning and off in the afternoon. So we've already seen the macro environment kind of down, right? We have recessionary fears, and that's just going to impact crypto kind of writ large, right? I think more concretely, the thing that is kind of, maybe potentially like existential is, there's a bunch of like, I'd say like low hanging fruit things in crypto. And I think about crypto as primarily a financial thing. I'm not big on like, crypto as like a social network kind of thing. I think fundamentally the kind of costs you have to pay for decentralization don't necessarily kind of justify themselves in non-financial applications where, lack of kind of counterparty trust is, you're willing to pay for that. And so I think about kind of DeFi and okay, we see institutional adoption kind of coming in. The concern really is, I think just putting it bluntly, is like, are we the like crypto natives, the people who are doing, startups in crypto have been around, are we actually going to be the ones to benefit from that? Or is it actually just going to be, pick your name, right? But the name that comes top of mind for a lot of people really is like Robinhood, right? And is Vlad just going to kind of roll in and kind of, take all of our market and be the one who dominates the kind of order flow here? And okay, great. We made a bunch of, neat software and neat tools, and none of us are going to get to monetize that. And, Vlad and Robinhood or the other institutions are kind of going to monetize that all, right? And I do think that's a concern. But going maybe back to your other question on like, does decentralization matter? I do think there are significant benefits to decentralization, even if you take a relatively kind of, cynical and less ideological view of, the censorship resistance perspective. There's a degree where like, one of the things I like about kind of like working in crypto versus working in maybe like a normal fintech is the reality of, from an engineering perspective, I don't really want to think about custody. Like I don't want to actually custody anyone's money. Like if that is the thing where saying, oh, I want to do, financial transactions, or like that is the kind of like, design or product space I'm working within, fine. Maybe that is the interesting product I want, but I would prefer to do that in a way where I just don't have the option to steal anyone's money, right? I'm trying to build a product. I don't want to steal anyone's money. I would prefer that to not even be an option available to me. And so in that way, one of the things I think crypto gives us is this option to have, hey, you can build this thing in a way that is decentralized, that you don't have to go figure out how to be custodial. But I do think there's maybe like, like the vibes are bad, like bluntly, right? Like this morning, the coins are up. So like everyone's like happy this morning, right? But like, we'll see if we make it to the afternoon. But I do think there's kind of an existential crisis of, who is going to profit, who is going to monetize out of these things right now, because, crypto is a relatively small industry. Our market cap is sitting at what? We count all the coins at like 3 trillion or something like that. That's a lot of money, but from, the TradFi kind of institutions, it's not that much money from them, right?
So I like to kind of answer this in two parts, which is how it affected me personally, and then how it affected the space as a whole. So personally, it's quite an interesting story, I'd like to think. I had kind of built a thesis around FTX that they were likely insolvent or had some pretty major issues around like October of 2022. So about a month before the collapse, I had written a now relatively infamous, thread or blog on Twitter about kind of my thesis around FTX being insolvent. And it was a mix of things, right? It was a mix of just, executives leaving at certain times, right? From everybody from, Sam Trabucco leaving to Brett Harrison from FTX US, everything from looking at like kind of derivative volume, looking at the difference between on-chain and off-chain. So FTX off-chain was actually slowly diminishing. So they were actually losing market share to on-chain derivative products, right? Your GMXs, Gains Network, DYDX, etc. And so, that plus, the excessive spending, I think was one of the really big things that we saw. is just, the amount that they were spending on everything from Miami Heat Arena to failed product launches like FTX NFT to the FTX stocks product that they launched. It was just seemed like flailing attempts to kind of drive revenue. And so you start to put all of these small pieces together, and it just felt like something was off there. And so I'd like to think I was one of the first people to kind of openly say there's something pretty shady going on here. Infamously put together a pretty large short on FTT in October of 22, to the chagrin of a lot of people. A lot of people called me crazy and told me that there was no way because Alameda was just making money hand over fist. And, and you could see on chain, they definitely were making a lot of money. But I think people, when you start to get to numbers that large, things start to get conflated. And people, maybe don't realize scale, or maybe they don't see scale as clearly. And so, yeah, just so FTX goes down in early November of 2022. This tweet thread that I had ended up going relatively viral. And with that, I kind of gained a little notoriety. A lot of people were coming to me asking my thoughts and theses about FTX and why things failed and things like that. And that was actually the exact time at which we started Scribe. I think we started Scribe like a week before the FTX collapse. I think FTX began collapsing on November 5th. I think it was all done by November 8th. Everything was kind of shut down and Chapter 11 was filed. We started Scribe on November 1. Just like officially kind of quit all of our jobs and our extra endeavors, and my co-founders and I started it. And so while the whole world was kind of blowing up and most people were doing really poorly, a lot of people lost, I mean, their savings, their entire trading portfolios, their livelihoods in a lot of cases, right? Lost their jobs. Scribe ended up doing really well, and that was actually a really great kickoff point for Scribe, where, because I ended up getting a little bit of notoriety, people were like, oh, you actually write pretty well. Seems like you know what you're talking about. Why don't you come help me on my project? And so it was a little bit of a kind of duality of man where, it was really tough to kind of see all these people going through these things, but that was actually kind of a taking off point and a huge inflection point in my personal career. So there's the personal side of the impacts of FTX. And then there's like the kind of larger ramifications of what happens to the entirety of the space, which I think is another really interesting topic. And I think we're still seeing a lot of these. I think there's a huge regulatory issue where now, you have Gensler who came so close to, working with FTX and, his family and, Sam Bankman-Fried's family and, a lot of these larger, people in the, let's call it, left wing of the ecosystem. It started to bring more fingers and pointing, and you're starting to see this kind of trickle down to a lot of the larger entities in the space, right? You see,
I believe the hoodies lack the understanding and of being a fiduciary and also understanding regulation. And so that's where the suits come in, and the suits are representing traditional financial players that understand deal structure and understand regulation. And I don't think finance is broken, but I think it can be upgraded. If you look at all the upgrades we've had from the fax machine, telecommunications, all sorts of things that are much more high frequency trading, or much more immediate, this is just the next step for traditional capital markets. And so my book is to help the risk committees and the compliance committees and people that have an idea of what it is but aren't sure. So the book is an educational and entertaining read. It is not a textbook, and it really ties together loads of examples of what's happening in there. There's institutions that are already building. It talks about why they're building and then that they're building. It talks about the shift in demographics and wealth that's happening to the millennial and Gen Zs, who are the ones that are much more digitally native and born with a supercomputer in their hand. And they're going to demand more digital opportunities. And they're already doing that today. I think that will continue. But there's a lot of benefits, and there's a changing dynamic. And I talk about kind of where I see the world going into 5, 10, and 20 years.
So I want to get into where you see that adoption, where you see the world going into 5 and 20 years. First, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna dive right in. I think, if I'm looking at kind of emerging trends and business shifts. So emerging trends, I think one tokenization. There'll be a lot more in tokenization, and tokenization dives into a number of different things. So if you look at, there's been a lot of tokenization of investment funds. So if you look at BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, has now tokenized a fund. Franklin Templeton, Hamilton Lane, KKR, Apollo. It's really, there's a reason they're tokenizing funds. I think it both is from a cost perspective, but it's also from a increased in revenue perspective, which we can get into later. So I think that is a big step. I think there'll be increases in digital identity, which work for finance, but work for other things as well, with the idea of being able to protect some of our privacies with zero knowledge proofs, but I believe people will solve that. And digital identity is important in securities because there's a KYC AML element, which is know your customer and anti-money laundering, that everyone needs to be approved before they can receive securities. And securities are the idea of investment. What else? I think data coming off the blockchain is big for AI. So it's clean because you know where the data comes from. I think that will be a huge benefit. I think digital money is probably really tops the list. I think there's going to be the idea of stable coins, which are much more immediate transaction. You're also, if you look at the idea of CBDC, which is central bank digital currency, I think that's slow in the United States because of privacy issues currently. I think it works for some other countries. I know, I forget the number, a majority of countries are looking at creating CBDCs. And if you look at China actually had created a CBDC. And they created that, but if you look at their market, they had Alipay and WeChat, which had a majority of the payments market. No one used cash anyway, and those were private companies. And so from a surveillance state, it gives them a lot more control into surveillance, having their own CBDC. So I think that those are some of the big, some of the emerging trends that are coming.
Yeah, it's funny, like I've probably iterated my thinking on, meme coins and, and some of these fads, over the years, but I think now I take like a less serious view on them. And I think of it as more like fun and culture, like, you would when you're like browsing TikTok or like Instagram. You see fads all the time across many platforms. It's not specific to crypto anymore as well. And I think the cool output that's come from, meme coins and some of these other trends that we see in crypto that are just more fun is that it actually tests the infrastructure. Like right now, like there's thousands of tokens being created on Solana every single day. And it's stress testing the upper limits of like what throughput and performance could look like for them. And, as you think about a world where everything's tokenized and like this whole narrative of like RWAs and real world assets and tokenization as well, if we have like every single asset being tokenized, there are going to be many tokens that are created every single day. And a blockchain is probably going to have to support that also. And so I think of a lot of the trends that we're seeing with like meme coins and some of the fun that we're generally having in the crypto space as ways so we can, stress test, is our user onboarding look good? Does our, can the performance of the actual underlying blockchains actually support the needs of, many of these users also? And so I've kind of started to see it in that light. And, it's generally fun to interact with. And, we all as humans like love playing games and love speculating also. And so it's something that's never going to change. And in fact, it's not specific to crypto also, like we see it in every other vertical or industry as well.
Interesting. I just saw it as a bunch of junk being created on Solana. But you said stress testing. Do you think the meme coins are going to be the catalyst that drive the Solana ETF?
They may not be correlated because still Solana is still like the underlying asset and for the native chain itself. But Solana is being used for many purposes. I mean, my old team at Visa, they actually believe that Solana is actually purpose built for payments. When it comes to payments, you can't wait for a bunch of confirmations to take place, or it can't be it's got to move really fast. It has to happen like sub-seconds. So I think we're actually starting to see the utility with Solana transcend just meme coins. And, right now meme coins obviously has a lot of attention, but if you look at the Visa report on Solana, they actually did a really thorough thesis and deep dive into why it's actually really strong for payment purposes. And you're starting to see like new projects pop up on Solana for tokenization where, what our friends at the team at MetaWealth, they're building a real estate tokenization platform on Solana where you can now buy real estate assets directly on Solana. And it's all through like a really nice user experience. and they're out buying properties and then making that really, you know, seamlessly available on Solana. And so you're starting to see more happen with Solana, and you know, the meme coin and the ETF is just a cherry on top, where, you know, as like a commodity underneath the hood, it's starting to like showcase its, you know, value proposition across many different use cases also.
I hope you enjoyed episode 4 of the Crypto Hipsters Carson Calls, which is my compilations from season 6 through 8. My books in seasons 1 through 3 were the Crypto Hipsters Chronicles. You can see them, get a book if you like on Amazon.com. And then seasons 4 and 5 were the Crypto Hipsters Mysticals. The Chronicles were 45 episodes, compilations, and the Mysticals were 22. And the final number I have for season 6 through 8 is 67. Not to be confused with Mellow Ball, which is 6-7. 67 episodes coming your way. This was number 4. So hopefully you can join me in this journey. And we'll see you for episode 5. Have a great day.